everybody. I'm Tiffany Lesnik with Live Free Legal. Welcome back. This is part 2 of Big Emotions You May Not Have Expected After Filing for a Protective Order. I am here with Tabitha Westbrook, trauma therapist extraordinaire. And we are here talking, again, part 2. We didn't get to finish our discussion last week. We had part 1 where we began our discussion about big emotions. So if you missed that, I would encourage you to go back on the YouTube channel and check out part 1. It was a thrilling conversation. And also, I just wanted to mention again, Tabitha just released her brand new book, Body, Soul, Healed, Whole, all about overcoming sexual abuse, which you can get at any bookseller, Amazon.com, or anywhere else. I would highly encourage you to get this book. It's amazing. And so, Tabitha, we're going to continue today with our discussion of big emotions you may not have expected after filing for a domestic violence protective order. So both Tabitha and I are both survivors of domestic violence, and both Tabitha and I have had to experience filing for a domestic violence protective order. In my particular case, I've actually had to file multiple domestic violence protective orders, not just one. And Tabitha, you filed?
I filed 2. One was an ex parte order, which is, oh my gosh, we need to do this right now, and we'll talk about it within the next 10 days. And the other one was not an ex parte order, which was one that waited for the hearing.
Okay, yeah. And so we've done this before, right? We've been through this process. We know how scary it is. We've experienced a lot of these emotions as victims of domestic violence ourselves. And so when we're having these discussions, we've been in your shoes. I've also had to call the police on multiple occasions. I've seen my ex arrested. And I've had to follow through when it was really hard to do that. And I didn't want to do it. I did not want to call the police. But unfortunately, because of his choices, I didn't have a choice, right? And even though that was difficult, that was the right choice to make. And sometimes hard choices, the narrow path, is the right path. And today we're going to continue our discussion. One of the things we talked about last week was you go from being in this really volatile relationship to suddenly now you have no contact, things are really quiet. You're not accustomed to that. And so what are some of the things maybe women might expect to experience when now they're in this kind of period of solitude and things are quiet?
The person who was with you wasn't great. It's still a lonely experience right now. You are by yourself. Now you are single parenting it, if you will. And there's a lot to that. Oh, there's nobody to tap out to. There's nobody to ask for help. And there's nobody to talk to at night, right? Abusers are not abusers every moment of every day. Some might be awfully close to that, I'll be honest, but most are not. And so there are those periods of, we'll call it normal. What we call an advocacy class is manipulative kindness. And so those are the moments where it feels less stressful and you've got this other person there and then now you don't. And so even the nice conversations aren't there either.
Yeah. And God created us to be in relationship, to be in community. And so when suddenly we are without that spouse or without that person in our lives anymore, it can feel very isolating and very foreign to us, especially when we've been in relationships where he has intentionally kept us isolated.
Yeah.
Right? So we haven't been able to maintain friendships, family, we've not been able to go to therapy or have jobs. So when he's gone from the picture, now all of a sudden we really feel alone. So how important is it to get connected to community, to therapy, to other forms of support after filing a domestic violence protective order?
That's very important. Healing happens in community. For some, I know that your community system was also potentially weaponized. We see that a lot with church structures that don't understand domestic abuse and coercive control, so they actually become part of the problem. So you may say, I no longer have my spouse or my church, and I don't know what to do with that. What I will say, one of the things I actually talk about in Body and Soul, Healed and Whole is how to find healthy community when you have not had that because you've been isolated and had to pull away from it, or the community itself hurt you. And that can be a support group. There are some great support groups, both in person and online, that can put you in space with other survivors, people who really get it. There are meetup groups and things like that. Let's say that you love cycling. You might find a group that does cycling and make some friends that way and start to enter into connection. Or there are groups that make puzzles or board games. There are board game cafes. There are cat cafes. If you're like, right now, my friendship level is a cat. Also fine. You can go play with the cats at the cat cafe, and maybe you get to know some of the people working there or other guests in a very let's enter back into connection sort of way. And all of those things might feel really scary because you haven't done that in such a long time, and you might feel like, I'm not even sure who I am or what I like. And I will just tell you, try them all then.
Yes, absolutely. And Called to Peace Ministries, www.calledtopeace.org, is an excellent resource for women of faith to get connected. They have free support groups. They have a free ministry online that's private that you can sign up for and get connected that way. One of my favorite worship artists, Brandon Lake, I'm going to give a shout out to B. Lake. He always says, if you've been abused in the church is filled with people, right? So we're imperfect, we're fallen, but the church is similar to food. There's always going to be a chance that you're going to get food poisoning at some point in your life, but you have to eat again. And so I would encourage you to go to another church home. Find another church family, even though that might be hard, because we're meant to be in community with other believers. We need other believers to lift us up. Let's talk about some of the ways women who've really been isolated, so husbands who have controlled finances, who've paid all the bills, have given them an allowance to go shopping, who've not allowed them to have a job. What other things might they be experiencing when they find themselves suddenly home alone?
Yeah, they don't know how to do things necessarily. You might not know how to pay the electric bill or the mortgage or any number of things. You may not have access to the bank account. You may not have access to things that you need or passwords for things. You may have a lot of things where you're like, gosh, I've never had to take my car in for an oil change. That was always done. And someone might be listening going, oh, privileged life. No, we should all know how to do things because our spouse could potentially go meet Jesus and we would need to know these things anyway. So, yes, if in a loving relationship, if someone is like, hey, let me get your oil changed and all of that, but if they're using it for control and power to keep you isolated so that you can't take the car. I was talking yesterday to a group of individuals and doing some overview training for domestic abuse and coercive control. And in the chat, one person said that their partner would measure the gas in the gas tank. And if it was lower than it should be, based on the location this individual was going, then they would be beaten. And that person was controlling the vehicle in such a way that this other person might not know things like how to get an oil change or how to know how much gas to put in and all of those kinds of things. Also, we know that electronic stalking is a thing, so that can be fearful as well. Is anything in the house safe? I don't know how to find some of these things. There's a lot of different things that you just might not know how to do and might not believe that you can. I've had a lot of clients who've been told you don't know how to even balance a bank account. You're not good with numbers. And the person that told me this, one of the first people, was a scientist. And I was like, wait, isn't that math heavy? Didn't you have to math to get there? And they were like, well, yeah. And I was like, you're telling me that you can do complex math and you cannot balance a budget. And we both just sat there for a second. And I was like, oh, huh. But the abuser has done such a good job of telling the person who they are and what they can and can't do, that even if they are a scientist, that they might believe they can't balance a budget.
Yeah. What you have to recognize is that you have been in this abusive relationship for such a long period of time. You are stronger than you think you are. In order to be in this kind of relationship and survive takes incredible resilience and strength. God created you to be strong. He created you to be brave. He created you to be fierce. And Jesus surrounded himself with really strong women, right? So he has confidence in your ability to stand strong and up for yourself. So if there's things you can't figure out, like I'm not sure how to pay the bills, I'm not sure how to pay the mortgage, I'm not sure what's happening with my auto insurance. There are organizations that can help you with those things. So reach out to domestic violence organizations. See if you can find an attorney that'll offer a free consultation. Reach out to legal aid, other organizations in your community who can help you answer those types of questions. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you can do it. We believe in you. We know it's hard. We know it's scary. We did it.
We've seen lots of people do it.
There is going to be some fear, and it is a little bit scary, but you have the ability to do hard things, and we believe in you.
And I will say, I know we've used the term domestic violence and coercive control and domestic abuse, and I want to just give a little bit of information for folks who maybe haven't heard our terminology in that way before, and why I'm leaning more toward coercive control. And that's because we know that not everyone is hit or sexually assaulted. And I do know that there's a lot of struggle. Do I need a protective order if I was never hit? And I will tell you, first of all, I know in the state that we are in, there is actually a portion of the law that if there's harassing behaviors and things like that, which does not mean that you have been physically assaulted in that way, you still could be eligible for a protective order. There are 14 states, I believe now, that also have coercive control either as a law or in the law. And so those might also be, if you're in those states, something to look into. It doesn't necessarily have to be physical or sexual violence that is predicating a protective order in some way. And so I just wanted to say that because I know sometimes people are like, I'm not being hit, but I am scared, and there may still be recourse for you in protection.
Absolutely. And actually that was our video in week 1. We talked about how the law legally defined domestic violence, and we looked at that all across the United States. Because most women, many of my clients, think that if it's not physical abuse, it's not domestic abuse. And it is. And so we use the terms domestic violence, domestic abuse, coercive control. They all basically mean the same thing, even legally defined. So that's a great point. And you can go back and watch that video in week 1. And that's why it's so important to subscribe so that you don't miss any of the content that we have here on this channel. So what are some of the overwhelming positive emotions that women can experience once they file a protective order?
Relief.
Yeah.
We mentioned that a little bit in episode 1. When you have been afraid for so long and you go home for the first time and know that no one is coming in and that you can sleep through the night. And so many of my clients, their abusers wake them up in the middle of the night and try to argue with them at 3 a.m. to deprive them of sleep. And so to be able to sleep through the night is such a good thing. Also, seeing the way that the children function in a more peaceful place, because the home is peaceful. And if you want chicken nuggets for dinner, you can have chicken nuggets for dinner, and maybe that wasn't allowed. There also might be joy at justice. And this is a hard one sometimes because sometimes guilt comes right behind it. But it is okay to celebrate that you can be safe. It is okay to celebrate the victory of having safety. It's okay to celebrate setting a boundary that hopefully will encourage the abuser to look at their own heart. Unfortunately, many don't, but hey, it's a seed planted.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I first filed my DVPO and I was totally by myself that first night, and just the feeling of, I can make whatever I want for dinner tonight. I can have a bowl of cereal if I want to, and I don't have to worry about him throwing it across the table at me. I don't have to ask permission for anything. And it just was, like you said, just this feeling of freedom that was wonderful. And yes, my girls, I could put them to bed a little later if I wanted. I could put them to bed how I wanted. Just that relief that you feel, that burden that's just lifted off your shoulders. It's just amazing. And the thing that I found with my clients too is just the empowerment to be able to finally stand up to your abuser, and speak the truth.
Yeah.
You get to speak your reality out into the world. There is something too that just makes you feel so validated. Even if you don't win sometimes in court, just to be able to face your abuser and tell your story for the first time is really an incredible feeling. And what I tell my clients as an attorney is we don't always win the battle, but that doesn't mean we're not going to win the war.
Right.
So I would encourage you, even if you don't always have a successful outcome, maybe you don't get that ex parte order, but perhaps you will get a domestic violence protective order at some point in the future. It's very important to stay persistent and keep moving forward and keep using your voice, because the more you stand up to him, the more empowered you are going to feel.
And God gives us agency, right? He's not a God of force. So we're always allowed to use our voice. And he also encourages us to use our voice and to use our voice for good and to call out wickedness. And if we are at the point that something is a coercively controlling relationship, and we are going to get a protective order, things are bad, right? And God would certainly have us call out into light the wickedness that is happening. So we're actually functioning in a beautiful, godly way, which I don't think a lot of people think about when they're getting that protective order. There's also that feeling of safety, right? I've had multiple clients where the abuser held all of the cards financially and they had celiac disease. I've had several clients in this space. And the abuser would bring home things with gluten in it if they were upset and say either starve or suffer. And so to know that you can eat food that is safe for your body is really incredibly liberating. And I will say I have worked with, sadly, multiple clients where their spouse was actually poisoning them and trying to kill them. And so they knew that they could safely eat without potentially losing their life. And again, if we're at the point of a protective order, we're at that point where that is not unlikely. And it is just nice to know that, like, I can be in my home safely. I can eat food safely. I can have that relief. So it's not just, can I eat cereal for dinner? It's, can I eat cereal that is not going to hurt my body?
And I've had clients the same thing that have been, we believe, have been poisoned or have had other physical issues happening with their spouses. And that's a really difficult situation when you're talking about how do I present this case to a court, because many times we're not believed. Even there's horrific things that are happening right across the street in the criminal courthouse. You expect me to believe that a husband is poisoning his wife when there's murder trials going on right across the street? I'm like, yeah, this person just murdered somebody. Of course I expect you to believe this. So we have to be very careful with how we present the facts to the court. But being able to tell your story, and especially if you can be successful in court, can be very validating. Now, there are situations where maybe you don't necessarily prevail in a hearing, and then the abuser is empowered. And that might make you feel like there's a sense of injustice, or there's disappointment in the justice system, which is very normal.
Yeah.
And that can happen. And what I would encourage you there is to not lose hope. Is there anything you would suggest from a therapeutic standpoint, Tabitha, that people can do when they're feeling anxious and stressed and frustrated with the justice system to calm themselves down?
Yeah. One of the first things I will say is if you're even at the point you're thinking about this, get an advocate. Advocates help you do beautiful things, including have your documentation in good order, and then you can hand that to your attorney. Hopefully your attorney is as amazing as Tiffany and will also understand what's going on. And if you need help, this is one of the beautiful things about this particular channel and the resources that Tiffany is offering. You can help empower your attorney if they're not as well versed in domestic abuse and coercive control. So you can give them some of the resources and go, hey, could you take a look at this? Maybe this will help our case. And I would say all the attorneys I've ever met have been very open to getting that when it's presented that way. And that can also help you be successful in court. Or you might be saying, look, I don't have an attorney. That's why I'm watching this YouTube channel. That would mean you represent yourself pro se, which means I'm doing it myself. And this can also help you go, oh, I might need some help getting things in order, because we know that when there's trauma, our brains are a little bit scrambled. Things don't come out in order, but the court system very much likes chronological order. And an advocate can help you get there. They can help you have the strongest case to put forward. The other thing that I'll say is that no matter what happens on court day, whether it is continued, whether you are successful in getting your protective order, or whether it is for some reason denied, God always wins. And I know you're like, but I would like him to win right now. I hear you. I really do. I've seen things that looked incredibly dark have incredible victories down the line.
Yeah.
We don't always know the path that's going to take. And I don't want to minimize the harm, the pain, the fear, any of that stuff, because all of that is so real. But we do know who wins in the end. And that doesn't mean there won't be heartache or hard as we go through it. But I think we can always have hope. And truly, as we hold on to hope, that actually helps us stay emotionally regulated so we can have a better presentation in court. One of the things that I know we see for victims far too often is a lot of dysregulation, and of course you're feeling all the feels, but then you go into court and do something like, he's a covert narcissist, and then the judge goes, she's high conflict and dysregulated. And that does not help your case at all. If you're working with an advocate and a therapist, or even just an advocate, because advocates are really helpful at grounding people, then you can start to have your emotions in check even when his body language is doing things that are sending messages to you that the court wouldn't pick up. Because the judge is not going to catch the vibe. They are not married to your spouse, but you will. But if you catch the vibe and you're like, I know what you're doing, you're trying to get me off my game, but I'm not. I have all of these regulation skills. I'm going to woosah. And then you present your case and with coherency, and when he's trying to cast you or her, because it can be either one, as a crazy human, then you can go, that's very interesting. I don't look at all crazy. And that's very handy.
And I cannot echo that enough, how important it is to have an advocate, have a therapist, have someone that provides you with emotional support, because when you file for a domestic violence protective order, sometimes emotions can be very overwhelming. Things are happening very fast. I liken it to the death of a spouse. So someone has suddenly died, and now you're put in a position where you have to make immediate choices. So when you file for an ex parte order, there is return hearing that's going to be scheduled within 10 days. So issues of protection, custody, sometimes support, property distribution, all of these decisions many times have to be made within a week's period of time, and you are just processing the fact that your marriage is probably over, that you just left your abusive spouse. There is a lot of trauma, a lot of crisis that you're dealing with, but you're also having to make really important long-term hard decisions. And many of my clients are not prepared to do that. It would be the same thing if someone just died and you have a whole team of people in front of you saying, you have to make all these choices right now. And those people are like, I can't do this, and emotionally shut down. So it's really important to have a therapist or someone come alongside you that can help provide that support, so that when you go into court, you are your best person possible to advocate for yourself and your children. One of the things that we talked about before we started the video that I see a lot, I warn my clients about, and I also wanted to warn you all about, is to be emotionally prepared for what you may see when you go in the courtroom. So many times your abuser is always in this position of superiority, lording over you in your house. And many times when they're on the bench and they're testifying in front of a court, in front of a judge, that judge has authority over them. So many times abusers are really put into their place, and they're made to look very inferior and very small. And it's hard for women to see that very larger than life figure now suddenly knocked down many notches, and many times experiencing very severe consequences. And so you may cry, you may feel sad, you may not know how to process those emotions when you're in court, but just be prepared, have tissues with you, and know that is completely normal and that is okay.
And I will also say you might also get real mad, because a lot of times abusers lie on the stand.
Yes.
And you're like, that is not what happened at all. And this is where, again, your documentation is going to be really helpful. You staying regulated is incredibly helpful. And also having something to do with your hands. So I know that one of the things that I've had clients do, and that I know other attorneys have had clients do, so you might disagree or agree, but a legal pad and write, and don't have a scowl on your face like that line, blah, 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 but like you're trying to keep your face nice and neutral. This is ridiculous and that is a lie, and all of these things, right? Because you might have to do something with your hands, because you might feel like, I'm gonna come over this table and we're gonna have some words, and that will not help you in court. And also, you liar, yelling it out, that is contempt of court. I don't recommend that. That can get you a nice orange jumpsuit, and nobody looks good in prison orange. So we don't want to do those things. So really keeping yourself regulated, even if they are lying through their teeth on the stand. Sliding a note over to your attorney and going, that's not how that happened. Hopefully your attorney's done a really great job of getting the story and the history, so they can go, that's really interesting that you would have said that happened on that date, because there's documentation here that says this, and can you help me understand? And then they're perjured themselves. And that's much more fun if you stay regulated.
Yes, absolutely. And I always give my clients a notepad. They can pass me notes. Yeah. And some of my clients will even just take the notepad and they write, like, I am okay. I am okay. Yeah. I am okay. Yeah. I am okay, to talk themselves through it, because it is important to have a poker face when you're in court. And sometimes it's important not even to look at the abuser, and just not even listen to what they're saying, because they're filled with lies. They have no problem lying. They have no problem hurting other people. It's all about themselves. They serve the father of lies. They're all about lies. And so go into it understanding that you're probably going to hear some of those things. So if you have that expectation, it won't be as upsetting.
Yeah.
And so I want to talk about freedom from fear. So having a life without abuse and how important that is. So when you file the protective order, when you have a supportive network, when you get into a supportive community, when you're in therapy, what that can look like for people to experience light and freedom from oppression. Do you see that with your clients when they come to you?
Yeah. One of the things I tell my clients is, man, I'll get in the dirt with you. We'll be in the valley of the shadow of death, but we do not make camp. We are going out the other side. And that is such a beautiful thing to see. I've seen so many of my clients go from basically going, I don't even know who I am. I've lost whoever I thought I was, and now I'm not sure who I am as I heal, right? And they find these things that they love, and life and light start to come back. I've watched people start businesses. I have watched them find new, beautiful relationships with wonderful people who are not abusive. I've seen them have kids. I've seen their kids flourish. I've seen all of this beautiful stuff that when they first stepped into my office, they were like, I don't know what's going to happen, and things are really terrifying, and they couldn't see light, and then they walk in light, and it's really beautiful. And it doesn't mean the road wasn't hard or difficult. Like, healing is not linear. You're not just walking uphill. I refer to it as a switchback, because you're like, oh, can I go over here? And it takes like forever to get over the mountain, but also that is the best way to get over a mountain without passing out. So, it takes a hot minute, farther than we want usually. But it is such a beautiful thing to see people walk in that healing and have these amazing, incredible lives. I know I didn't think I was going to live through what happened. I remember distinctly one night thinking, he is going to kill me, and I'm going to be buried in the backyard over the septic tank. That really is where I was at. I could not imagine sitting where I am today. And thankfully, I had good people around me who, as I walked through it, could imagine me sitting here. And I guess you probably were in that same spot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I have this little placard back here which says, don't be ashamed of your story, it will inspire others. So he can take a lot from you, but he can't take your story, he can't take your testimony. Right? Your testimony can be a light to so many other people. If you look at Tabitha, what she's done with her practice and how many women you're helping every single day, and now with your book that you have out, I'll hold it up again, Your Body, Soul, Healed and Whole, and how many women this is going to reach. So we can take that which is broken, and God can do transformative things through our broken stories. And what he's done through my life as an attorney, being able to help so many victims of domestic violence and children that are subjected to abuse. So don't give up. I would encourage you to just stay the course. How long can women expect the healing process to take? And is it dependent on how long they've been in an abusive relationship?
Oh, my favorite therapeutic answer, it depends. So it really depends on the nature of trauma, when trauma began in your life. If you had childhood trauma, developmental trauma, it's going to take a little bit longer because there's just more layers, right? If you think about, we're peeling an onion, what's a large one? And so we have to peel back a lot of layers. And I don't know if you've ever peeled an onion, but it might make you cry. And that happens, and it takes a minute, but each layer is a layer of healing. And each layer is a new light that we get to walk in. So even if you're like, I have had trauma longer than I can remember because I can't remember parts of my childhood, which by the way is a sign you probably have some childhood trauma. That doesn't mean that the long journey is always a bad journey. It's a beautiful journey. And I don't love to put a timeline on it because everyone is different. I will say, trust the process. That's why we are the journey and the process. We're all on a journey and we're all in process until we go home with Jesus. And it is okay that the process takes as long. And so I had a woman recently say to me, I'm in my 60s, are you sure? And I'm like, are you still breathing air? And if the answer is yes, and you're talking to me and I am definitely not in the sixth sense right now, then yes, healing is possible and it is worth it. It does not matter your age.
Absolutely. And give yourself grace. It's going to take a while. This is not going to be instantaneous. I even talk about abusive men, if you think about it like an addiction. So if they were addicted to alcohol or drugs and they've been addicted for years and years and years, they're not going to go to one counseling session or 2 counseling sessions and be miraculously healed like they espouse to be all the time. But even a 30-day rehab program is not going to be sufficient,
No.
right? We need long-term therapy. And this goes for us. When we're in these relationships, our thinking is distorted. How we view ourselves is distorted. And so we need to give ourselves grace and give ourselves the time to heal, because it's going to take a while. And what I found for myself, Tabitha, I don't know if you found this or not, but I was able to gauge my healing process by the amount of time that I spent thinking about my abuser. So in the beginning, if he would do something, say something, etc., I would obsess all day long. I can't believe he said that. Why did he say that? I have to journal about what he said. I had to contemplate my next move or action. And it would take up my entire day. It was extremely controlling. And then as time went on, I would think about him less.
Yeah.
And less until the point where now I don't think about him at all.
Yeah.
And so I think if you look at it like that, how much am I thinking about him? I think you can gauge where your healing process is.
And how much does shenanigans bother me? Like, they're probably going to be a little irritating, especially if they involve your children. You're going to be like, ugh. But also, it's going to be more like water rolling off of a duck's back in a lot of ways, where you're just like, meh. You know, and like some of the thoughts I had personally were, do you not have something better to do?
Yes.
I have so many better things to do. And then I would just go on.
Yeah. I have that too. I'm like, you're ridiculous, or I'm so glad I'm not you.
Yes.
I'm so glad I don't have your life. Thank goodness I'm away from you. So we believe that there is healing for you. We believe there is freedom for you. We believe there is freedom from fear for you. We would urge you to subscribe so that you can join us every Tuesday at 7 p.m. for more broadcasts of this nature. And Tabitha has her own podcast called Hey Tabby. We would encourage you to subscribe to her podcast so you can learn even more from her, because we would encourage you to be the best you that you possibly can be, which will also help you improve your legal outcomes. And tell us where they can go to find your podcast.
They can listen to Hey Tabby, and that's TABI on any podcast platform, or go to TabithaWestbrook.com and go to the Hey Tabby tab, and they can find that there as well. And we do say the hard things out loud with our actual lips.
So remember to subscribe to Tabitha Westbrook's podcast at Hey Tabby. Subscribe to our channel and give us a thumbs up. Give her a thumbs up on her YouTube channel. We hope you will join us next week on Tuesday at 7 p.m. We hope that you enjoyed our part 2 session. Oh, I know I enjoyed a lot. This has been amazing. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and all that you're doing for women, it's amazing work. It's so needed. Just remember, I'm a North Carolina licensed attorney. I can't offer legal advice outside the state of North Carolina. If you need legal advice in your particular state, we would encourage you to seek the advice of an attorney in your state. We hope you'll join us next week at 7 p.m. as we continue to support one another, learn more, empower one another, and move from fear to freedom.